So, Julian, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself for those that don't know you?
Sure. Currently I'm a solutions architect at Quest Software. I've been here almost 5 years now. I've been in the Microsoft space in various products, going almost 20 years now. I started similar to Steve in the Exchange space and kind of just broadened my horizons to other parts of the Microsoft family once Exchange kind of got cannibalized into the cloud, as a lot of us fellow Exchange guys did. So naturally fell into the IAM space and security space, and have been doing that for a number of years now. So, currently working with my day-to-day, I just work with customers on, various migration and security assessment projects that I get assigned, along with any, other things within Quest that get it thrown my way.
Interesting, you've went on that career route because often Tony Redmond gets asked by Exchange admins for where they should go next, and that's exactly often one of the best sort of places to go to have another successful career that's easy to sort of move into. So I'm over the moon to hear that's working out pretty well for you.
Active Directory was born because of Exchange, so it kind of just was a natural fit. So here we are.
Yeah, you have to learn one to learn the other.
Yes, there can't be many Exchange admins that don't know how to use AdCedit. True. Again, like AI to write your homework, you're not supposed to.
Yes, changing an Exchange first.
That's right. Test it there first, see if it works.
Yes.
So, we were talking earlier about AD and ADFS and its vulnerabilities, and I know there's a lot of activity recently with quote unquote AD modernization. And I just wanted to kind of talk to you about what that is exactly, because I'm not sure that our audience really understands what that exactly means. I think they probably make a lot of assumptions.
Yes. AD modernization, it's a term that's been around in the field for a while, but modernization looks at there's different facets to it, right? So there's the migration side of it too. You're acquiring if you're going in a M&A scenario, whether you're divesting or merging, or if you're just doing your own internal domain consolidation, there's the migration portion of it. There's also the business side to it. So as AD has grown over the years and just recently celebrated its 25 years, obviously the identity space for Active Directory's grown over the years. So there's a lot of pieces to the directory that you need to account for, whether that's your ransomware and recovery and backup strategies and how you go about performing those, or even from the business point of view of if you're in a large enterprise and you're in a siloed group and you may have portions of the identity in different regions around the world where you're working with different business units. There's the business side of do I look at consolidating that all into one global AD team, or is it better in my organization if I functionalize it under different regions? There's a lot of portions to the AD modernization of it. So those are some examples of it. So, in a lot of the migrations that I've been a part of, or I've done over the past few years, I've done a lot more investigation into the business side of the technical side for those that are in the technical part of it. The technical part is quote unquote, I'll put it in air quotes, kind of the easy part if you've done it before. Like a migration is a migration when it comes to Active Directory in some sense. A lot of getting into transforming how you do things, especially with a lot of the identity features, especially things that Microsoft's releasing, and a lot of it going to Entra ID first, is a lot of organizations are going in that journey of, well, how do I get to Entra ID first scenario, right? So it's almost similar to the Exchange example that I brought up earlier. A lot of organizations over time, they made that transition from having on-premises Exchange servers to Exchange Online. I think the AD space is kind of the from what I'm seeing is the next big leap of how do we go from on-premises directory? How do we, operate in sort of this hybrid model for a while and to eventually get to a Entra ID cloud first state?
Let's talk about that a little bit. So this is years journey, I think the old conversation was, how do we get rid of the last Exchange server in this hybrid environment? And I think some have gotten to that point, or they've gotten completely off of Exchange at this point. And then, and now we're talking about, how do we start to move away from Active Directory? Is that really the drive, or the goal? And the drivers are, business drivers are security and, maintenance and, simplicity and strategies towards moving to the cloud. Is that really kind of what's pushing it all? It's a combination of security and cloud strategy.
It's a combination of a lot of it, yeah. And that a lot of organizations, what we're seeing in migration, it's twofold. I think you kind of see Microsoft's message where they look to, well, move what you can to Entra first, and then go back and assess what you have on premises and try to clean it up. Where I think some viewpoints may differ is they may look at, okay, well, what do we have in-house that we know that we need to fix first? Because some environments, and the three of us have been in a lot of them and have done our fair share of migration assessments over years. So you guys know how it is. You've seen them where it's like, wow, this is just really such a mess that you need to clean. Like, the priority is to help reduce the risk of a potential breach is you need to go and clean up internally first, clean up your infrastructure first on premises before you even think about potentially, opening up that door to Entra ID, for things outside of, I think most organizations at this point have some sort of, hybrid identity or hybrid sync into Entra, right? But to actually go through and maybe converge those identities to go Entra first, or potentially move your workstations to Entra. If you don't change some of the business processes that you're currently doing in-house, and you just extend that over to the cloud, to Entra ID, that you're almost exposing yourself more at that point, because you're not changing the way you need to operate from both the business process and security standpoint. You're almost opening your organization to more risk by just taking what you have and just, okay, we're just going to go put it in this box versus the box that we already have. You're exposing yourself to more at that point.
I mean, that sounds like a problem that I almost would have thought would happen, but is that something you see where organizations aren't taking?
Yeah,
I've seen mature organizations where they say, I don't like the idea of it being on the cloud, anyone can access it. It's like, yeah, but you're going to secure it, aren't you? Can we? Well, we only bought Office 365 E3 licenses. But what? That conversation doesn't happen anymore, at least with me. Maybe because I'm Microsoft partner, but so people have been sold these things. But are you seeing that a lot then still?
Yeah, I've seen it in many migration assessments that I do now. They'll go and they'll say, well, we had this E3 license and we now have upgraded to E5 and we have all this new stuff now that we're going to use, and we may forego some of these other tools that we have before because we went to E5. And you have to look at, well, you have these tools for a particular reason. Just because you've upgraded and have these new identity features at your tool belt with your E5 subscription doesn't mean that they completely serve a purpose that you need to cover for your enterprise or for your organization. I've seen that in a lot of organizations, whether they be immature or they have a bravado that they think they know more than they think they know. So I've seen that, and
that's the learning curve that we all
yes,
where you learn,
absolutely,
about it, and then you slowly realize you don't. But yeah, so finicky things where I think even people that I know a lot have then looked at something from Microsoft in the E5 suite and assumed it's going to work a certain way, and then when they went to test things like, how privileged identity management might work with some of the on-premises systems, it was not better than the existing.
Yeah. Like I have Defender for identity or for domain controllers. Like, and if I have that and I use it for a purpose that I don't cover another business purpose for, then there's a gap in your security part of the plan that you didn't account for correctly. So that's where a lot of the modernization programs that I've been a part of, that we take a part of, is we try to fill in the gaps of either, based on your modernization transformation, what you might be missing or what needs to change and what gaps to fill in. That's where I've come in and help the organizations see what they might be missing or what they might need to account for as they kind of go on that journey.
I suppose part of that's what being a consultant is really, where you read the bump, you read the marketing for Microsoft, you have a go with it, maybe you do a small POC, things look pretty good, but what you need to get is from a consultant or contractor that's experienced, somebody that's been there and done it, that can say, well, after 6 months or at the end of onboarding people, there's some problems that you might see. Because
right, and the modernization part of it, it's a journey. It's not just a lot of these modernization projects, they're like you run them at a program level. It takes years. A lot of the the business processes and drivers that you try to change behind how you operate and how you secure things, it's a people change. It's a people and process change. It's not just a technical change you have to worry about too. I think I preach that more than just the technical part of it too. I preach the people and process side of it it's more of a key in a lot of these program initiatives.
And by that, are you talking about, for example, where you've got to convince somebody to change what they're doing with a process or software or
take identities, just procuring identities, that's shifting it from on-premises to a cloud system. How far along are orgs doing that in your experience, Julian? Are they still?
And they take a lift and shift of some of the processes that they're doing on premises and they just move that over to Entra ID, and it may not be the best way of doing it.
So let's say they've got a HR system that has no integration into Entra ID at the moment, but does sync to AD on premises. Mm-hmm. How are they taking that and just lifting and shifting it there? Because that's a common problem, isn't it?
In a lot of the modernizations that you'll try to do, the biggest thing is the application authentication. It's there's a lot of apps right now where it's, if they're developed in the cloud first, it's SAML auth. Those are the easiest ones. Those are the easiest ones to move. But the ones that have Kerberos or MTLM, still if they're using it, those are the ones
you really
that
have
take
to
the
segment
longest.
those. I mean, don't you segment those kind of apps into their own? I don't know, AD or Forest or
So what we've recommended, so what we typically recommend is for I've seen folks go about it a few different ways. It's almost like they almost take like they'll take they almost take the applications and almost call it they almost use it as like a resource forest almost at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
Where like they'll take some of the applicant, like, well, we know we can at least move it over here and then try to isolate it off where it's not exposed out anywhere else. And folks are just going to have to use two different accounts they'll use their main account to authenticate into their Entra ID services or M365, and then for the legacy apps that they haven't figured out a plan of whether they're just going to do a lift and shift of just doing something like Azure Migrate, using like Azure Migrate as for an example, right? Do like a lift and shift to some servers, so something like that. That's another way that folks have tried to solve that problem. Or if they need to completely refactor that application, if they're trying to cloud modernize it, right? They'll take it and they'll move it in its own little forest where it's contained and isolated and say, okay, well, you have this dedicated account that's used for your app here, and you're just going to use that to authenticate in, and then it's just there until it retires or it's retooled, right?
I'm going to ask a question. Really, what's the worst sort of biggest? I'll put it sort of like, not mess. Mess isn't the word, because it's never. It might look a mess or it might seem chaotic, but each of the individual cogs, I suppose, in a big, large enterprise environment, has an owner of that cog that understands it quite well sometimes, right? But what is the biggest sort of mess you've seen, and how long can these things take? Just to give people, is this I think is it that some of these things can be much longer.
Years, well, because you've seen it before. There's the 20-year business applications that they run a critical part of the business, and they were developed by a development team that was there at the time, and either they've moved on from the organization in multiple various ways, and it's down to one or two people that know the application, and they only know it to a certain degree, and they don't know, like, well, if I patch it, does it break? Yeah. Yeah. Or no owners. Yeah.
And they said, we've got something called Merlin. We've no idea what it even does, but it's called Merlin and we like the name, but we found it when we switched something off and people complained.
We all have that story.
Yeah, the wizard name sounds nice. Yeah. You can only imagine how critical it is for the business.
One of those things, 10 people are probably relying on it, but it's damn important to those 10 people, right? But often, there's people in the business who own the app, and there's people who support the app, I guess, but what's in it for them to move across? Often, I guess, nothing.
Yeah, I mean, you see it from the business side too. It's like they have their own little piece of the puzzle, and people, like if it's that critical to the business, that they feel like, well, if they go and they move and they modernize it, they're
not isolated, right?
What to mitigate? Yeah, it's like the people value. It's like, well, what do I have now that it's over here now? There's the people part of it too, where a lot of these modernization projects, it's, those of us who have known Active Directory for so long, it's we're not getting any younger, obviously. The new wave of yeah, no, you're reverse age. You're reverse ages. The folks that are coming, the folks that are coming in their like early 20s now, they're coming in and they don't know what Active Directory is. They know it. They might know it. Why would you learn it? Yeah, it's a legacy.
It's not just people coming in now, right? Because one of the team leads at my place, he's been there, God, 8 years now. But yeah, he grew up into a cloud-first world, right? And he's been one of the most senior people in the place I work. He's been in IT for, over 10 years.
I know.
Yeah, you see that in a lot of organizations where they're like a younger group, or you see it in some organizations where, depending on how people are laid out in an organization, where when you talk about modernization, right, you talk about the identity productivity versus identity security, right? And a lot of times, they try to merge those two together to have one cohesive solution. But you see some security folks who are really intelligent and really smart, who know what they do, but they've never interacted with Active Directory. They think Active Directory is it's just another microservice they have to go and protect, where they don't know the backbone of AD and how integrated it is throughout the organization. They don't get that aspect until they get in it and see what they have to go and protect. And same thing you look at it from the other side too. You have your fellow AD administrators, where AD's their own piece of the pie, and they know security to a certain degree, but they don't know where security is coming from with that message too. It's, you almost hear like, hey, you guys were just the whole SolarWinds incident you guys were just talking about earlier. It seems like I've just dealt with work-wise, there's two incidents that we've heard about in the past month that we've had to come in and hear about. Well, this is what happened. It's almost almost adopting zero trust to say like a Zoom breach, because at some point you almost feel like you're just next on the list.
Are we being too? Are we giving too much leeway to some of these people who haven't learned this stuff?
Steve, I remember talking to you and some of the fellow MVPs I used to talk to, like at some of the old conferences we used to go to. It's like, once, we kind of saw it where like we come from the old FOPI days and the BPAWS days and those fun days. And it's like, if Microsoft can get it right, they could scale this if they get it right. Then Office 365 was announced in 2014. It's like, we think they've got it right, and they scaled it out. And, and a lot of the conferences,
it was earlier than that. You're older than you think.
Yes,
2011. It was, I think, announced and released 2011.
That's right. Yeah. I got my years. I got my years wrong. So
you're losing day. You're losing years.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, no. I was off. Well, no, and I think we saw it even from like if you use that example, it's like if Microsoft is going to take over a lot of these they're going to get the majority of people in Exchange Online at some point. If you have not learned how to use Exchange Online, or like they haven't updated your skills, like shame on you for not doing it. It's literally a repeat. It's a repeat of, it's a repeat. Exactly in the identity space now. It's a repeat now. If you're an AD administrator and not learning Entra, it's same thing. Like I think from an Entra ID administrator standpoint, and it also depends on job scenario too. Depending on where they are in the organization, they may not need to learn it. But if they move somewhere else and they encounter an environment they've never seen before, it's like you should have that skill set in your tool set.
I think it's a common theme we've heard on the show before, right? The silos between IAM and security, and they're breaking down, but there's still a lot of challenges overall. I mean, I think that's all part of this equation.
Yeah.
You can't learn all of the vast amount of new stuff. Even in Enter ID, right? You know, for example, all of and this is, I've forgotten the name of it, which I guess underscores my point, because I've been in several meetings at work about this, because obviously, you know, the access gateway stuff.
Just safely
Microsoft
guess
are
that it
doing.
has Copilot in the name, and then you'll get
No, it does Internet access gateway stuff that they're doing for Enter ID and moving across from a tunnel.
Yeah, the SSE and all that. Yeah,
Yes. So there's so much to learn, right? So
yeah, it's where do you
still
where do you start? Yeah, I know. Yeah,
then actually it's not like you move to the cloud and you just set it and forget it.
No.
Tons to learn about. And no one knows. You know,
I mean, you used to, as an admin with shrink wrap,
all this stuff.
You used to be able to keep up, right? Shrink wrap would come out, you know, at a good pace. There would be out some you know, yellow books or some kind of white books or something out there. It's like gave you a get boost, and you're like, you take your cert for the next year. And you're like, oh, I'm updated, and you know. And now with SaaS, like that's all over. It's non.
Don't say that.
I mean,
this book is probably the worst timed and probably worst selling exam guide.
I remember that book
because it came
I studied that book. I remember that book.
I wrote a big chunk of it.
I know you did. That's why I giggled when I saw it.
It's the only Microsoft book that mentions Oxford and Nuneaton inside the exam guide, because well, that's where me and Brian are from. But I thought, I'm going to make loads of money off this. And then, of course, if I went to the cloud...
This is funny. Just missed it by this much.
Yeah.
Julian, we've talked about identities and some of the problems with managing identities across. You talked a little bit about apps, and you know, the easy ones to move, and you know, isolating the ones you can't move. What about devices? Like, where are devices in this journey? Are customers still managing everything in AD, or what are they doing?
So from what we're seeing, I think that's kind of we're seeing a lot of organizations go that route with you know, moving their devices from you know, just on-prem AD managed or hybrid joined to Enter ID joined. I think that's where we're seeing a lot of organizations actually make their way.
Gateway drug to cloud only.
Yeah, that was a Satya. I don't know if you remember that, Steve. That was at the first Ignite. Satya had said Exchange was the gateway drug to the cloud. So I think this is like the evolution of that. Ironically, they're back in Ignite's back in Chicago. So, I can only. I know Greg's going to be
losing, isn't it?
Yeah. I think that's I wouldn't say it's the lowest impact, because there is a lot to unpack from that, right? So
there's a lot to unpack from that. There's tons of work to do, but often the end result is better for the user in many ways.
I think from a productivity standpoint, yeah. So it's like if they, you know, from a user standpoint, like if they're getting issued if they're part of a device refresh, or for, you know, some reason the device has to be refreshed or reimaged for some reason, you know, when they go through that process, if their device is Enter ID join, they follow the, you know, they follow the prompt, and they just put in they send in their information, everything's brought down to their machine. It's like foolproof for them at the end of the day.
I know, you know, we all know that. Yes, you can do that with a AD joined machine, a hybrid as your AD joined machine with autopilot. If you do it on a Sunday and you balance everything on top of each other, and you manage to get you either got the right VPN product in place, or you manage to deploy your VPN profiles. You know, you've got to do a large amount of things, or have line of sight to a DC and all this sort of stuff, where actually there's many failure points in that process, isn't there? The most common one we see is when you're doing that kind of migration is you know, if you lose sight if you're in a hybrid migration and moving to Enter ID join, and you somehow lose DC connectivity when the VPN has to be reconfigured during the migration, like you lose that line of sight, then somehow the migration may fail. Or if it's a autopilot managed device, the autopilot record's not cleaned up properly, you know, during the move. So I know there's some third-party tools that help with
with migration to Entra ID, have been parts of migrations where, there's, tens of thousands of devices in organization have migrated using third-party products successfully. So
Well,
the technology is there. The technology is there to do it. I think a lot of organizations are going down that path.
Are there other companies than Quest that are doing this then?
What I've seen, it's been limited to Quest at this point, and yeah.
I mean,
yeah,
I mean, in terms of blocking customers previously, what are the biggest blockers from them moving to their devices to the cloud? Part of it was resetting
all
them.
the machines,
reset every machine. Yeah, that's not
and
practical.
How long
right?
is that? That's in most cases a day for every employee.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
the whole
that got included in the product.
Yeah, and the whole the technical
migration anyway.
Yeah, I mean the pre-planning part to get ready for it that we've seen that's a journey is the conversion of using GPOs to Intune-based policies, and
I can imagine. There's a tool out there right there for that. For Microsoft has a tool to map it or something.
Yeah, I believe it's in preview right now. But yeah, it's just it's another one of those. It's another one of those process things that we talked about earlier, where who's managing the it also depends. Do the AD administrators that organization also manage the workstation GPOs, or is there a team that's dedicated towards client that manages the workstation GPOs? And then they have to go and learn the Intune policies and what they can implement in an Intune policy for GPO and what they can't. Like that. So
you can do things a different way, right? And there's other ways. I think when we had John Jarvis on a few weeks ago, we did touch upon this, but you did say about not just lift and shifting what you do with applications. Does the same apply in what you do when it comes to policies where, yes, you could probably transplant a GPO across, but there might be some Microsoft templates and so on?
Yeah, no, in any modern, and this even gets into the directory side of it too. So the GPO transformation in any AD modernization program, it's one of those it's a huge thing to consider as part of the programs, because you're looking at if I'm migrating to an existing, or if I'm doing a domain collapse, or I'm going to a greenfield, and that's where from a consolidation standpoint, that's typically your two directions, right? If you're trying to consolidate on premises, is do I have identified a target forest where I can safely and securely move to, or is it better for me to go greenfield? And there's business cases to both, right? Greenfield gives you the opportunity to do it right. Like it gives you a fresh blank slate, a fresh clean state to do things right. Time. Yeah, if you did it wrong the first time, right? Yeah, let's get it right the next time you do it. Yeah.
I've had customers who've come to us and they said they've been stuck for months at that point where, and I can feel the fear myself, when I think about it, where that there's a combination of policies that have layered on, and obviously there's a resultant set that are on a machine, and a fear that however right you get it, if all of the Jenga blocks that keep the machine,
you could open up a vulnerability.
Yeah,
you could open up a vulnerability, or an application that people rely on suddenly won't launch.
Yeah,
and no one can remember what it was.
They don't know which setting in the GPO was removed that or notified that broke this setting, right? Yeah,
it's and the fear that might happen. That would be
a lot of risk.
A fear for me. If you've spent ages automating the registry settings and deploying it, you wouldn't. But I don't want to break this thing.
So, Julian, which has to come first? When you're moving a device to Entra ID, like you were saying, does the GPO and all of that, I assume that all has to be decided first. It all has to be mapped out first. It all has to be to the T before you can move the device and then switch over to Intune, right?
Yes. Because you technically don't have to do that, but if you don't have the right settings for your Intune policy in place, you might open yourself up to something that you weren't expecting or weren't anticipating. So yeah,
because getting off the GPO drug, you're going on to the Intune drug, and you need the same drugs.
But
Same
if it's not
quality.
difficult to recover from, aren't they? You know, especially if you are trying to fix this remotely for someone working from home, and you're trying to push out a policy to try and change a set of settings. It might be you're trying to change settings so you can actually help them in the first place to remote out to the machine or something. It could be you could be way hours away from fixing a problem for them.
Yeah, that's one of the worst things in any migration that you could do is you have a remote worker where you're trying to migrate the workstation, and no matter how you're trying to migrate them, something doesn't go right, and
you need some
out of
zero-touch tools.
Yeah,
integration like that. Actually, in the old days with the Quest tools for AD to AD migration, and boy, those could be a pain. In the days of 128 kilobit per second links.
Mm-hmm.
So there's worse things out there, but the remote assistance. Let's say I don't know these OnGuard or something like that, and the firewall rules. Even though it's on the VPN, the firewall rules are booked, and you've got to try and put them back in, but they're not in right. Or something like that. Do you know what I mean?
I know. Yeah. Oh, you're absolutely right. Yeah.
So you've got a choice between a day of inconvenience for every single person in the business, or actually doing a lot of upfront work of 3 or 4 people with some help, maybe, or however many people, to just get this right. And it's definitely a measure how many times cut once kind of thing.
And a lot of these things, especially in business, it takes a village to get it all to get it all over there, and different folks with different skill sets. It definitely does.
I won't ask what the worst thing you've seen is, or the worst, the worst disaster, because that is just going to put a fear of God into anybody listening in. Because I suppose most of the time it happened to you.
To honest, the worst thing has been just sitting in on. So I've had the opportunity to sit in on some ransomware events where there's an actual ransomware recovery event going on, and it's. You hear the incident response playbook, and you hear what they have in place, and it's like just in your mind you're thinking, how did you not account for this, or how did you not plan for this properly, or how do you didn't because you don't practice. Your playbook is only as good as what's on paper unless you actually perform it and practice.
There's a lot of people who worked at Maersk when they had that incident, and I think one of the stories was, I don't know how true this was in reality, but that the entire AD was saved because of PC in Africa running.
Yeah, I heard the same thing.
I've heard that too. Yeah, that was just offline, and they had a really old copy of that was proven to be
That's
scary.
That's luck.
Yeah, and that's something we preach to as part of like an AD modernization program, is looking at your backup and recovery strategy. Like, do you have please don't tell me you're using your VM snapshots as like your backup to recover from. Heaven forbid that's like your only line of defense, right? Having
mention those.
Yeah, so like just having the ability to recover from that granular attribute level to actually being able to recover domain controllers and recovering a forest, and having your backups in immutable storage. Oh, there you go.
Just format it as exFAT and copy it ntds.dit onto it and just take it home with you. Throw it in the drawer.
What's the worst that can happen?
Nothing can happen.
All right. Okay. So yeah, not an USB stick, but it's a little bit more secure, I imagine. But if your a recovery system hangs off a domain controller, you might
like an offline. Yeah, you're and things to also monitor ADs. Just monitoring. Your things like the DIT file, or any access requests to the DIT file, or monitoring any changes to GPOs or any membership changes to security groups. I mean, that's where I've been on. Fortunately, I've been on the other side of ransomware incidents where they were alerted ahead of time that, hey, we have our monitoring tool in place that told us that there were changes made to DA and EA membership groups outside of a production authorized change window, and there were these accounts that weren't part of the naming standard. Like, we know something's going on. So, a lot of what we preach on the security side of modernization for best practice securities, with some folks know it as like the defense in depth model, right? So having various various lines of defense, having various lines of defense from, whether you consider your logical separation or consolidation of AD one of those, or how you protect your GPOs, how you protect the domain controllers, what's your backup and recovery strategy, having multiple tools and tool sets to monitor and protect your AD, it helps reduce the risk of, if there isn't it's limiting that blast radius. And so we've seen that in some organizations too, where they're like, okay, I know for just reducing the attack surface, like just reducing the amount of domain controllers, or reducing the amount of domain controllers I have, reducing the attack surface, I know I need to do a consolidation. Some organizations we've seen, they've had like security by obscurity, right? Where they have, we have all these, segregated systems, and, from a network wise, they physically can't get to them. So it's secure, right? If they can't get to them, it's like, well, that's security by obscurity. That's not really the right way of doing it. So they go through a consolidation process.
Is it, I suppose? Is it?
Yeah.
Because it's obscure to somebody that's not looking for it.
Yeah.
If there's a lot of customers where we will do an initial, like, just scan against it, and you realize that there's loads of people that have been in the organization who had at some point, obviously, like, you must see this a lot as well, had domain admin rights at one point, and so
yeah, it's because that's just the way they operated. Or there's some shadow IT in place where there's some domains and forests that are in the organization. You don't even know they exist, and you're part of the global team, and you don't even know they exist. They operated in there independently. We've seen that.
Yeah, you've seen it. You've been on the other side. You mean you're saying you've seen it work? You've seen when people have done this stuff, and then it's actually paid off. Because I thought you were going to say, when I was on the other side of this and the Russian hackers employed me to and then I realised that there was three sides. Obviously, the person attacking, the person who defends against the attack, and of course the person that fails. And that's good.
Yeah,
but
so
that's what you don't see, very often, because nobody says, well, I defended myself against an attack. I just did my job. Because no one pats you on the back for that, do they? Actually,
No.
If there's a ransomware attack and you successfully recover all of the stuff 3 weeks later, weird thing is you get a pat on the back, but you don't so much for, well, what's the point? Why are we buying all this stuff?
Yeah, it's if you're making that kind of, and that's one of the goals of a program too, would be if you're investing this money in your proper monitoring and tool sets, if you have a SLA that says I can recover this in 8 hours, there's also the business case aspect too, and that's a big part of any modernization program. Obviously, it's just there's a cost factor too, right? So if I'm investing X amount of dollars,
from what happens with actual government attacks, like cyber attacks, but what is it they call it? Meat space attacks or something like that in the army, and that. But they, a government will always. And so should you, trump up the times where you successfully defended against it, because, certainly, as a Brit or as someone from the States, you do want to know that actually that we've been protected against 3,000 attacks, because then you can understand why you're having to go through all the pain. So I suppose what we maybe need to do is promote the success you've got, because you don't often hear the success stories like the one you were just telling us.
Yeah, and I've been a part of the side where they go through where one of the places I was at during my career, they went through a transformation program like that, and you saw a lot of the improvement in process and people change and the tools and the migration. A lot of it, a lot of it paid off, and that, it was like a 3 to 4 year program from what I was a part of on the customer side when I used to work in that life. But I mean, I was there long enough to where I was able to reap the benefits of going through that on the other side. It was a lot of work to get there, but on the other side of it, it's like, yeah, this was worth the investment. This was worth it. Just from a productivity standpoint, it makes, the admin's life easier, improves user experience for the users, brings back, cost savings in there. It's all worth it at the end of the day if you go through that journey. But just the proper planning, you have to do it right. And that's where a lot of organizations now are trying to figure out, now with their AD strategy of where they're, they see where Microsoft's going, they see where the investment's going, so they also want to get there, but they're trying to, they also have to factor in, like, well, where are we going from our application portfolio? Where are we going for the identity portfolio? And try to maneuver that in. And some organizations can have a program that they can have a big program that can operate under, and some can't. But that's what we're seeing kind of in the field, is they're trying to see where they can, what's the easiest way to make their mark, and kind of like, as you kind of set the gateway drug analogy earlier, and then build on it, but also try to build on it the right way.
So what are we missing from modernization? You talked about moving identities, devices, apps. We talked about backups and recovery, because companies aren't doing that properly, and you should do it in modernization. And then we talked about monitoring too, which we didn't do back in my day. There was no monitoring in AD. Like, I didn't know what a critical asset was. So what else? Modernization project. Like, what are you guys talking about?
I think the other thing is probably just around some of the group migrations, which that kind of goes along with the
sure.
on the identity side with the with user accounts and how they're going to map
the management, everything.
Yeah, the provisioning part of it too is the other part of it, where you have your we're trying to see organizations move from Entra ID Connect to the Cloud Connect, and they're looking at their comparisons of what am I losing in moving to Cloud Connect versus what I have in Entra ID Connect. And I know Microsoft's working on feature parity to make it as close as possible, and they've made some strides. But yeah, the provisioning identities, provisioning groups, that's another work stream as part of the program. I think from a security standpoint, we see a lot of the it hits multiple factors, but looking at the tiering concept and trying to adhere to kind of the enterprise access model with security, and trying to establish a proper tiering model for administering AD. One of the crucial things I think from a security standpoint is we try to go through as part of any one of these modernization programs is, what's your control plane, right? What are all of your tier 0 assets? And there's a lot of guides out there that'll tell you, well, here's what Microsoft lists as their, any accounts in the standard privilege groups in AD, you should be classified as a tier 0 asset. Well, what's another tier 0 asset, right? It could be your Entra ID Connect servers, or your
the ADFS,
which we just talked about earlier, or if you're using web application proxy or Azure App Proxy, or if you're Okta Shop, your Okta SSL servers, or if you're integrating Okta into AD, and that a lot of those third party and any of your backup tools that use those critical assets, like establishing that control plane of what you have as your tier 0 or the control plane. That's something that we try to help customers go through, and I try to identify, because once you have a good control plane from there, you'll know, okay, well, here's what should have access to that, and here's how we access those, whether it's in your OU structure design, whether that requires some changing to your OU structure, which it typically does if you're trying to put in the tiering model, right, or using privileged access workstations, or having PAM tools in place, whether you're using native Windows Labs, or using like a third-party PAM tool like CyberArk or one of the others, to check in and check out your privileged accounts with password rotation. So, I mean,
to me, out of this whole conversation, to me, like, AD modernization is part of a cloud strategy, but more importantly, it's about if you continue to have a hybrid Active Directory, you need to secure it and properly back it up and properly monitor it. And this is the time to do that while you're transitioning to the cloud. And, and I think apps and devices seem to be like the two biggest blockers to me. Apps, yeah, we can segment them and mitigate but eventually we want to get rid of them because we don't want them at all, right? We want them in the cloud and away from that identity broker. And then devices just seem to be, just a big pain. Now that you can move them without being wiped, it seems like a better proposition. At least
it's the app migration part. Yeah, that part hasn't. It was always in when Entra ID wasn't a thing and you were just doing a domain consolidation. The app was always the hardest part. That that hasn't changed. So the application is always this
TLM. I thought they were coming up with something that would be cloud-based for ADDS in the Azure, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I read that in a
They are working on something now. I did notice that they're actually introducing, trust within Azure ADDS, which is also another.
That's right. That was part of
yes.
that. Yep. That's
Yeah,
new.
I
Can
read that.
root domain
And that's what we need, more trusts.
Yeah, I read that, and I'm like, yeah, we're trying to get rid of trust.
More
Why are
pathways.
yeah, we're trying to get rid of all of our two-way trust and go to one-way or zero trust if we can. And now you're just introducing the capability for people to just do that in the Entra side too, and just I kind of.
What will Fabricam and Tailspin Toys do if they can't have trusts?
I don't know what Consoso will do either. So yeah, I don't know.
So Julian, you have a new blog series coming out on Practical 365. Tell us a little bit about it.
Yes, yeah. So the name is still TBD. I think it's going to be called Practical Identity. So you should be seeing that hopefully coming out soon. It's going to be a monthly blog series on best practices. So a lot of where this came about is a lot of the work that I've done in the past, I'd say probably 2 years at this point, is a lot of it has been around, Active Directory modernization, Active Directory security assessments, Entra ID security assessments, and just a lot of things that I've picked up in real world experience of the things to just look out for. So each monthly blog will just be like a one particular topic on here's something that you can do to help improve your posture of identity of identity security, or something to bring in some productivity, basically to some ROI to your identity environment. So what kind of inspired me to another thing that inspired me, so a lot of the assessments I've done, so there's I've seen some blogs out there that they do a great job on things like how do you look to turn off NTLM, or how do you turn off SMBv1, or can you turn off RC4 at some point soon. So seeing some blogs like that kind of inspired me to kind of start that series. That's kind of where the motivation comes from. The motivation kind of came from that, alongside of just the real life things that I've done. So that should be hopefully coming out sometime this month or next month, at least be the first article of the series will be coming out.
That does sound interesting. I was about to then start asking you questions about that instead, but I know we've not got time.
Yeah.
But yeah, we should have the first article out next month. So yeah, you'll see some real life examples of things that I've encountered in the field and my fellow peers have encountered in the field. And, here are things that you can go to, identify and help remediate some, particular problem or feature, in air quotes, that we've seen in AD that shouldn't be used in some particular ways. Yeah,
good addition to Practical 365 for sure.
I'm definitely looking forward to it.
Right, so of course, people are going to learn a lot from you at the Experts Conference as well. So tell us just a little bit about your session. Give us the elevator pitch for people who are on their way or planning to go to tech, maybe listening to this on the way to get a taste of all the sessions alongside the other guests. What can we learn?
So my session at Tech will be, be about things that we've talked about today. So it's driving identity through security. So a lot of the modernization principles of an Active Directory program, you'll have some takeaways there. What are the security, driving migration through security. And, if you're going through a modernization or some sort of consolidation, here are some best practice security points that you can take in along the way. What are the pros and challenges, and how can you avoid certain challenges in kind of your migration journey, and how security can help drive you there.
I think that is all we've got time for. So thank you very much, Julian, for coming on the show. It has been a pleasure, and I get the feeling we could have just the three of us talked all night. So thank you to the listeners as well, but thank you most of all, Julian, for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's good to talk to you guys again.
Thanks for attending, Julian. Really appreciate it, sir.
Thank you.